FlossTube, this is Karen with KB Studio Creations, and today I'm going to show you some ways that I fully finish bookmarks. Since I have a number of patterns that are bookmarks, I thought I would create a tutorial to help you with finishing your bookmarks. So the first way I'm going to show you is one of my favorite ways to finish, and it's pretty simple. So basically what you do is you fray the edges. This isn't focusing very well, but on this one I use my sewing machine to sew. Let me see if I can get it closer so you can see. Don't think it's gonna focus. I'll try to insert a picture so you can see. But I sewed a border and then I frayed the outside edges. I did the same with this next bookmark, and all these patterns are available in my Etsy shop, which I will link down below. So this one, once again, I just removed the outside ones. And once again, it's not focusing very well, so I will insert a picture. One thing, once again, I don't know if this will work. I will insert a picture if need be. So sometimes I do, it's not focusing very well, but down here below is a backstitch line. And if I do a backstitch line, I do it in such a way that it's a continuous line on both the front and on the back, just to help keep it a little bit more secure. And then if it's full cross stitches, I don't worry too much about it. So today I am going to fully finish this one. So I've already cut it out, and I've cut out 5 squares away from the edge of the pattern. And one note, this pattern is not released, and I don't know if I ever will release it. It's another alphabet like used in this one. I have 4 alphabets that are available in my Etsy shop, but this one was going to be a part of that too. It's going to be my snow one, but I kind of haven't finished it. Partially because there hasn't been a lot of interest in the other alphabets, so it didn't seem as important to finish this one. So what I do is I take a needle or a counting pin and I remove the outer edges. Let me try to get a better angle. I use a counting pin or a needle and I remove the outside edges. You can start here in the center to remove it, or you can start on the side and work your way up. It just kind of depends on the fabric, how long your line is. Obviously on the longer lines, the center won't really work. And once you get it started, you can often just pull it off with your fingers. You don't need to use the pin. And so I'm going to do 3 lines. You can leave, I would say definitely leave at least 1 line of unfrayed. Sometimes it's a little hard to get out, but 1 line at least of unfrayed. So I have 2 lines here, but you can do it all the way too, but I just worry about the cross stitch unfraying a bit when that's the case. So now I'm going to move to the next side, and once again, just take it out a little bit with the counting pin and then pull it all the way out. As you can see, sometimes it gets a little bit caught. So once again, I'm going to use the pin to help me release it. So that can just be thrown away, the excess, and there you have it. A finished bookmark. So like I said, this is the way I find to be easiest and fastest, but sometimes you want to do something a little more intricate. So sometimes I sew the edges and then fray the ends with a long fringe. So with 14 count Aida, I often just do it 3 squares fold it over 3 squares. And so I usually count 10 out and then cut it. And then I fold it over and sew it, which I will show you with another one. So this one, this was a test stitch. I made changes before I released the final one of this, so I just have this left over. I gave a little more space from the outside edge of the cross stitch. I did 14 because with it being 18 count fabric, it needs a few more squares to fold over, probably about 4. And then the tops were already 23, so I just left them at 23. So the first thing I will do is fold these over and pin them and then sew the lines. This is another example one that was not the final version. So I sew not quite to the top and not quite to the bottom, just a little bit past the top and the bottom of the stitch. All right. So I have pinned along the folded border. And like I said, I folded about, for this 18 count, 4 and 4. With the 14 count Aida, I usually do it 3. So now I'm going to start sewing just a little bit below the bear, and sew all along the line to a little bit above the top of the heart-shaped balloon. And I sew just down the middle of this line. And of course I take the pins out as I go. And do make sure to reverse after you do a few stitches. And reverse at the end. When I get to the top, I release it and cut the threads, as well as trim these ones at the other end. Now I will do the other side. Same thing. I will stitch this line along the middle, starting a little bit above the end where the cross stitch ends, and go into a little bit below, trying to make it about even with the other side. So now you have it stitched and you have it loose up here. So now that that's stitched, I cut off this area. I look where the fold is and I cut down that line until I'm about even with where the stitching starts. And then I cut it off horizontally. And now I want to make sure I cut it at the same spot on the other side. So I'm actually going to use my counting pin to help me figure out where that will be. So that line is where I need to cut to. Actually, I think I'll cut it first. And then cut along the line where the fold is. And now I need to do the same thing on the other side. So once that's been cut, you can now fray it. And it's just the same way as we did with the previous bookmark. You take your counting pin or needle and just work these threads out and then pull them. And you can do as many as you want, but just don't fray past where you cut. I usually fray to where I cut, if you can see there. as you go along, it often starts getting stuck more because there's so many more threads you have to pull it out of. It also gets harder to see what are your ends and what are the fringe as you go on. Sometimes I just start pulling them through when they get stuck in the middle. Rather than pulling them out this way, I pull them down and out this way. And I would like to note that before doing any of these bookmark finishings, I did iron them. Vonna Pfeiffer in her tutorials has some good ironing tips. So if you want to check her out, I will link her channel below. She also has some other great tutorials for finishing, since she is a master finisher, a professional finisher. And like I said, you can make this fringe however long you want. The longer it is, of course, the more time it will take to remove the threads to make the fringe. So I think I'll stop there. I still have one more line I could remove, but I think it'll be fine. And there's the fringe for that side. As you can see, it's a little bit longer than the one I did for this one. You can just pick however long you want the fringe. I will now go do the other side off camera. So there we have the finished bookmark. You can straighten these out. They do tend to get mixed together. They also, I don't know if you can have some little fuzzies on the end. You can trim that off if you would like. Or you can just leave it a little fuzzy on the edges. So that is the second type of bookmark finishing technique. The third type is one that I've only done once. My husband made the suggestion to do this, and I tried it out and I liked it. So I'm also going to show you how to do that one. I have 3 bookmarks that need to be finished that way, so hopefully throughout it you can gather what I'm doing and I can teach you well. So I cut out the bookmark. At this point, I have it 10 from the top and the bottom from the letters, and then I did 10 on this side and 12 on this side because I need a little bit extra on this side for the way I'm finishing this. So basically, we're gonna tie in a little ribbon, so I need a little bit extra space on this side. My husband will be doing that part because it's very hard. You also could just sew it in. All right, so I will be sewing on these 3 sides and then hand sewing this side in. I have a strip of fabric. It's a little smaller than the cutout thing. I would like it to be the same size or bigger. However, this is the fabric I want, and this is what I've got. So I will make it work. So what I will do is I will pin the right sides together. And since this is smaller, I think I'm going to sew it on this side. rather than on the Ada side, which is what I would usually do. I am going to trim this. So that I don't have this excess fabric. And so I will just go through and pin it, making sure it's centered. And I'm just going to double check to make sure I'm pinning the right side. So this is the side I want sewed. So I will be pinning it all along these 3 sides, the sides that I want to sew. This one is a little bit smaller, so I'm going to trim that even closer so that I don't sew in the wrong position. All right, I'm going to take this to the sewing machine and get sewing. So I'm going to start on this edge, leaving this edge open. And what I'm doing is I'm going to have the edge of the foot line up with this tan line. And I'm going to make it zigzag a little bit. You could probably just do it with a straight stitch, but I just feel more secure about it if I use the zigzag stitch. And of course, I'm going to take the pins out as I go and secure it at the beginning and end with by going reverse. I better check this because I'm worried it's doing it too close. Because last time I think I didn't do it in as far. So let me pull out a pin and check. So there is plenty of room between the letters, I don't know if I can show you, and where the fabric is sewn. So I'm not worried about it anymore. I'm going to be careful as I come to the edge. I'm going to hand sew it a little bit. And then I'm going to lift the foot and turn it. Pull out the pin on that side and continue on. Once again, I'm at the edge, so I'm going to turn it by lifting and lifting the foot. And at the end, I did the back stitching. So now I'm going to release it and trim the threads. This is another reason why I like to do it on the Ada side when I stitch usually with the sewing machine, because then I could see without turning it inside out where the zigzag is. Also, usually I think I would make these a little closer together zigzags, but I think it looks okay. It's all good. And I'm also going to trim this top down to be the same length as the fabric. So now it's time to turn it inside out. I use this wood stick that came with some batting. I know Vonna Pfeiffer talks about using some chopsticks from Walmart that she likes, so you can check out her videos to find those out. But I'm just going to use this. And so the first thing I do is I just start doing it by hand and just start turning it inside out, or right side out, I should say. It's inside out right now. You're just gonna keep working at it until you get it all the way turned right side out. I think I'm going to start using this stick to kind of help me push this last bit of it right side out. And especially for the corners, I definitely want to get them as right side out as possible. This is a thick Ada, so it's not going to be perfect, and I didn't clip the corners, which you can also do to help putting the corners right side out. As you can see, you can kind of see where the sewing is. Once again, why I would like it thinner, and I probably should have chosen a matching color, but I didn't really have a matching color, so I just went with the white that was on my machine. So I think that's sufficient for me. At this point, you can iron it if you want, or you can just kind of flatten it with your fingers. So the next part is putting in the tie, which my husband will do because it's too hard for me to pull through, but he likes this look.
Hello, FlossTube. This is Jason with Karen. And so what you want to do is, I have my ribbon here. I've cut off a little bit extra. Be sure to cut off a little bit extra because you can trim it down whenever you fully pull it through and finish it off. But at the same time, the more you have, the less likely you're going to pull it all the way through the fabric. So you want to take it, you want to fold it in half, like I already have. It's good to give it a nice little crease here because it'll help to push it through the needle. Okay, I have it through my needle. This is the delicate part because you've got to make sure that this doesn't fall out, and you don't want it to fold over on itself yet. What I like to do is I take it and I put it in the middle of the back and then look at the front. I probably can go a little bit higher than that. Oh, this is going to be hard. But anyway, you want to try to line it up. Sorry, this one's going to be a little bit harder because I can feel that there's some extra fabric right here that I'm going to have to punch through. But that's okay. We can work through it. The key to this one is just patience and strength. So if you're working at it and it doesn't seem to be working for you, see if you can get somebody who's stronger to do it. That's why Karen has me do this. And it looks so nice when you're done. So I don't know if Karen has talked about it, but one of the things that you could do is just sew it into the bookmark. And this is the part where it takes a lot of strength. And it's hard for me to do here on camera because at this point you just need to pull it through. And I'm afraid because of how much strength it's going to take, and once you do get it through, it jerks. So I'm afraid that whenever I do it, it's going to knock the camera all over the place. So forgive me as I'm going to stop it here and Karen will be taking it back over again. I just don't think I can do this with the setup that we have to make this look good. But you just punch it through, and then from here, you just want to push it all the way through. Another good idea is to use like something stable and flat like a table to help push it through, because that got it a little bit of the way. So, but the key is you want to be careful because you don't want to bend your needle. So back to Karen. Okay, FlossTube, I lied. I have to show you one more thing apparently. So once you have your ribbon pulled through, you have a loop on one side and your two free ends on the other. I don't know what they're called, but the loose ends. Sure. What you do then, you take your loop, feed your two loose ends through that loop, and then you're going to pull it tight. If you end up with some squonkiness like I have here, just keep pulling. And so you see there's a little bit of folding on it. I think I did something funny with this one, but it's okay. It still looks fine. As you can see with how it looks here, you end up with your typical bookmark and the ribbons on the end. Now, like I said, this is way too long, and as you can tell, they're uneven. So all I do is I line them up together like this, try to get them pretty much on top of each other. It doesn't have to be perfect. You can take them and do them like this. That's fine. It'll create some unevenness, which looks kind of cool. Depends on what kind of look you want to go for. For this person, since I know who we're giving this to, and I know what character they're playing because this is based off of their character in D&D, what I'm going to do is I'm going to create some unevenness with it. So they're a little bit off from each other. And you just take it and you cut it at an angle. Because then it creates these two little jagged edges, pointed edges. To me, it just looks more finished, looks better. And that to me seems like a good, reasonable length. It all depends on what you want, how you want to do it. But as you can see, besides the tying off of the final end, this end is now completely finished and it's looking really good. So back to you, Karen, for the finishing.
I'm now going to use a sewing needle to sew up this last end. I'm using some embroidery floss so it kind of matches better, but sewing thread is better, it's more secure, but I want it to match a little bit better, even though the edges don't match that much either. So to create a knot at the end, I lay the thread on the needle and then I go around the needle 1, 2, 3 times. I hold that fabric or that thread and then I pull it all the way through. That creates a nice secure knot. I'm going to leave the little tag end of it. You can trim it closer to the knot though. So I'm going to fold in all this excess fabric. And I did a lot of extra fabric, it looks like, so it's kind of extra, but it's kind of bulky. That's what I'm thinking, the word I'm thinking of. But I'm just going to go in and thread this down in at the corner so it comes out at the corner. Now you can use a whip stitch or, oh, what is the name of the stitch? I recently learned it. The ladder stitch, I think it might be called. I will, if it's called something other than ladder stitch, I will put in what it's called. But basically what you do is and I also find the tutorial I watched so that you can watch that tutorial, and I'll have that linked below. So basically you come in under some of the thread, which I think I'm gonna come in on this side, and it's just a little bit of the fabric. Pull the needle through and the thread, and then go in, and once again on the other side, go in under and pull it tight. So then you have a little stitch across. Come across, put it through the fabric, come back out, and keep doing that all the way across. And since I'm going to insert a link, I don't think I'm going to keep showing you me sewing this up because since it's a newer stitch to me, it's a little harder for me to do on camera. So while finishing it off, I did remember I wanted to show you something, how I finish off the knot. So I pull it through this last time and I take the loop. I think I need some extra space. So I take the loop, let's see if it'll focus, okay. And I have the loop and I pull it through and then I pull it down so that goes down to the meet the fabric, and then I do that again. You can do it a couple more times, but I usually do it twice, and then I take the rest of the thread through it and pull it tight. And that makes a pretty small knot. And then I can't remember if I learned this from Lindy Stitch's Heartstring Sampleries or Heartstring Samplery's finishing tutorials, or maybe both, but you take the needle and you put it back in through the fabric and you pull it down a little ways and then pull it. So that kind of helps hide the knot. And then you pull this extra thread, trim it, close to the fabric. It'll focus, maybe not. Well, trim it close to the fabric. And then you can kind of just move the fabric and that tail is hidden. So there we have this bookmark that's finished in the sewing manner. Like I said, I have 2 more to finish. They are on different fabrics, so I think I will probably show you them as well. Once again, if you want to iron it to make it look a little bit flatter, you can do that, or you can just kind of leave it puffy and wrinkled, but you may want to. Also, my fabric that I used had some flyaways, so if you have any flyaways, trim those off as well. So there you go. And I did look up the name of the stitch I used on this other side, and it is the ladder stitch and the slip stitch. Those are 2 names for it. So that is the name of the stitch used to secure this end. It's not perfect, but I'm sure my friend will like it. So this next one, I'm going to finish the same way as I did the last one. Like I said, this is a new method for me, so I'm still mastering it. So since this is 18 count Aida, I counted it 12 out and 15 out on the side that needs to be bigger for the tie, rather than the 10 and 12, which I did for the 14 count Aida. So once again, I'm going to put the right sides together and pin it. And since the backing fabric is bigger this time, I am going to sew on the Aida side. And once again, I'm going to leave this side open because I want the tie on this side. And so that's where I need it to be sewn up. Technically, you could do it on either side. You just need to leave one side open. So now I will go sew it. So I'm at the sewing machine, and once again, I'm going to sew along it. I do think because the other one was so wide, I am going to make my stitches closer together. So we'll see how this goes. Remove the first pin, and then get ready to start. I think this time I am going to move it so it's not quite to the edge of the foot where I'm stitching, a little bit inside of it. So the camera ran out of space, the phone, but basically what I did is I zigzag stitched all the way around like I did with the last one, and this time I did remember to clip the edges of the fabric in the corners. So now once again I'm going to turn it right side out. Oh, and I also trimmed down the outside fabric to match the same length as the Aida fabric. Maybe make sure I'm careful of the back stitching as I try to get this right side out. As you can see, these corners are going out a little more. I mean, the fabric is a thinner fabric, but it also, I think clipping the corners helped me to be able to get these corners a little bit more pushed out. So there that is. And now I'm going to let Jason put in the ribbon. So I will pass it over to him.
Hello again, FlossTube. So, while I was working on the previous one, I figured out a new way of doing this, so then it's not as hard to pull through. This one may be hard just because it's a little bit bigger of a ribbon. But again, I've kept my ribbon to a little bit longer of a length than I need. I've only put one end through. falls out a little bit easier, so you got to be careful with it. But I'm going to do something so hopefully it'll stay. Okay. So, but I'm only going to put one end through this time. And instead of going through the back, I'm going to go through the front. Before I do that, though, just to make sure I'm okay with it, I'm going to put it through the back to get my hole so I know where I'm going. I don't know why, but I think it's just easier for me, because this fabric's just really hard to see where I'm going, whereas here I can kind of guide it a little bit better to go through one of the holes in the Aida cloth. You know what, it might be easier if I just take the ribbon out for right now, because all I'm doing is putting a guiding hole in the fabric. My hands are too sweaty, and so they're slipping around on the needle. So I apologize that this is taking a little bit longer than I intended. There we go. Okay. So now I have a hole going all the way through. Okay. So, like I said, you're just gonna take one side of the ribbon. Now that you have your guiding hole in the fabric, take one side of the ribbon and pull that through. It's a little bit easier to do. This is a higher count Aida cloth and a little bit thicker of a ribbon, so it's still going to be kind of hard for me. But it's a lot easier than trying to just pull two thicknesses of ribbon through at once. Come on. Again, I'm kind of worried that this is going to pop out and I'm going to end up knocking off the camera and it's going to be just a big hot mess. So I apologize if that happens. When I did this on a previous one, it went through just so beautifully, so perfectly. It was nice. And I was like, oh, I can't wait to show FlossTube. But now I'm sitting here like, it's back to being really difficult because, again, smaller cloth, thicker ribbon. I can't seem to get a good grip on it, so I'm trying to use my shirt to give me a better grip, but that didn't work. You know what? I will be right back. I have another idea on how to get a good grip on that. Sometimes it's good to get a good something to clamp with. Hopefully these work, because I was recently using these to twist some nails and I think I bent it. There we go. Come on. There we go. Okay. So now I've gotten one end of the ribbon through. Takes a little while, especially whenever you're working with smaller Aida cloth. Okay. Now the tricky part, I've got to get this other end. So I've threaded the other end of the fabric. So basically what I'm going to do is I'm going to end up with a loop on this side. Before I do this, I want to make sure I don't end up with a kink in the ribbon. You can see that's kinking right there. So Okay. Also, side note, this ribbon may not be the best. We'll see. Okay. It's giving me problems again, so I'm just going to grab my vice grip thing. Okay. Whew, that was close. Okay, so again, I have my loop here on this side, sadly with a kink in it. Hold on. So I have a kink in it. So what I'm going to do is just pull that through. Actually, I need to pull this one through because that one's longer. Okay. So I've worked the kink out. It's fine. And again, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to take it, put it through the loop, and pull. Okay. So again, we're just going to take these and line them up. This person's a little more orderly, so I'm going to try my hardest to actually line them up. We'll see if that works. Got them lined up. Thankfully, I was able to keep at least that part lined up. And I'm going to come here. This time they're more lined up, and I'm just going to snip them both together. Okay. That's probably a little longer than I want, actually. So a good rule of thumb when cutting, in general, which I'm sure most of FlossTube knows, measure twice, cut once. But in this case, don't cut off too much, because if you cut off too much, you can't add more on. But if you cut off just a little bit, you can then go back and see, be like, I don't like it that much, so I can cut a little bit more. If you cut too little, or if you cut too much, you can't go back and change it. I think I said that wrong. Okay, so that looks a lot better. Okay, so as you can see, I now have the finished tassels on the end, and thankfully, as fearful as I was able to get it even through that really small count Aida cloth, thanks to just putting one side in at a time. Putting them both in at the same time is hard. It takes a lot of strength. But doing one side at a time, go in backwards. Go from the front to the back, and then you have, because you want your loop in the front. That way, this part here is in the back. I don't know why. That just looks more professional to me. Maybe because if I turn it upside down, it looks kind of like a tie.
Now that Jason has the ribbon in, I'm going to sew this up. Technically, you could sew this up before you do this side. I just like doing this first just to make sure it goes in. Because if it didn't go in, I would probably try to sew a ribbon in on this side. Don't know how well that would work, but that's probably what I would try to do if it did not go in on this side. So I went ahead and used a slip stitch to sew it up. I wasn't paying attention, and so I did cut off the knot right here rather than pulling it down through like I showed you in the last one. It still works, it just doesn't look quite as nice. And just a note, this ribbon is a 1/4 inch, and the thinner one he used on this one is an 1/8 inch ribbon. I wouldn't try thicker than a 1/4 inch image ribbon to pull through, because as you can see from Jason, it's really hard to pull it through when it's the thicker ribbon. I have one more that I'm going to do today. I'm not going to show you most of it, but I thought I would just show you. This one is on some 28 count Lugana. I counted it out 20 squares, or 20 threads, which is basically the equivalent of 10 squares on the 14 count Aida. And I used this gift that was given to me. It's a thread hopper to help count it out. I can just use a counting pin on Ada, but for large areas, a thread hopper is really nice. One of my model stitchers made this for me, and she gave me this note. Stitcherista, her playlist cross stitch tutorials, FlossTube number 174. I will also link that down below in her channel, but this can be really helpful for counting out on linen. So I will go make this bookmark, and I will show you the finished result. So I'm going to show you how to do one with the ribbon sewn in. So I have my bookmark cut out, and I did the same amount of squares on all sides since the ribbon will be sewn in. So I'm going to want it to be on the side of the 20. So I fold it in about half, and I can trim this later. And then I want to center it, and I will then pin it to the cloth. Let's make sure this is in straight, so that I can sew it, and I will do that in the other room. But I just want to make sure I have that pinned in, and I will pin the sides as well, but you've seen me do that in other ones, so I will do that off camera. But I will just sew the sides like I have done with the other ones. So I have sewn around the edges and trimmed the excess fabric. I could have trimmed this ribbon as well, but I decided to leave it there. I also clipped the corners to help me with turning it right side out. So now I will go and turn it right side out. So I turned it right side out. Well, my husband did. And I sewed up the bottom with this ladder stitch. So I now have this, and I'm just going to trim these. You can trim them any way you want. I'm just going to do a diagonal and call it good. So this way I just like, because if you don't have a lot of strength, it can be easier to add a ribbon in instead of this other way where you have to pull it through the fabric. But there is another way. You also could technically do this without any ribbon at all. It would just be like the other ones, just skip the ribbon. So there you have it. Another way to fully finish a bookmark. So to sum up the types of bookmarks we fully finished in this tutorial, we have the one where we just remove some of the threads to add a fringe. And as I mentioned before, this one has a cross stitch border around it. Although this one doesn't even have a full cross stitch border, which you could either, I feel like it's close enough that it's fine, but you can also add a line of border of backstitch and do it in such a way that it's a continuous line. And this pattern is It's You It's Like by Michelle Bendy Stitchy and Diana Itiskismet, so I will link that below. All the other patterns I've shown in this have been my patterns, but I will link this pattern below as well. And then you can also sew around it with a matching color of sewing thread. You're using the sewing machine, and then fray it. The second type we did, we sewed the edges on the sides and then frayed the edges, having to have a fringe. Then we did the kinds where we sewed a fabric on the back. And then we had two ways of doing ribbon. One where you pull it through after you finished, and one where you sew it in as you go, as you sew it together. So those are some ways to fully finish your bookmarks. So we hope this tutorial was helpful. If you have any questions, let us know.
Post in the comments below or reach out to us. Do you have ways that people can reach out to you?
Yeah, all of my contact information is down in the...
in the doobly-doo?
Yeah. The thing
Somebody else calls it that. I don't know why they call it the doobly-doo, but the note's down at the bottom of the video.
And hopefully this is helpful for you. And this was our first tutorial, but we will hopefully be doing some more in the future.
So
happy stitching and finishing.
Happy finishing. Yes.